Members, the time for this debate has expired. Call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Alcohol Reform Bill Committee stage continued.
I declare the House in committee for further consideration of the Alcohol Reform Bill. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker. Honourable members, the House is in committee. Kia ora tātou, no reira te whare, inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawe wha tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Honourable members, before I recognise the first speaker, there is a correction of a vote. Last night, the result of the vote on the question that the amendments in the name of Te Urawa Flavel to insert new Part 2A was incorrectly announced as ayes 44, noes 66. The result is ayes 44, noes 76. The record will be corrected accordingly. Thank you. Now, we are resumed on the Alcohol Reform Bill. Members, we are starting with the debate on Part 3. Last night, the Honourable Member Kevin Haig had the call and he has 4 minutes and 11 seconds remaining. I invite the member to seek the call and its debate on clauses 12 through to 284, Part 3.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair.
I call the Honourable Member Kevin Haig.
And could I express my gratitude and that of my party to the government and to other parties in the House for the change to the rules of engagement for this part to enable us to take adequate calls. I've spoken several times in the House about the Ottawa Charter in this debate, and in particular about the sense in the Ottawa Charter to which New Zealand is signatory that to improve the health of a community we need to empower that community, and I'll deal with that part of the Charter in another call, but also to create a supportive environment around that community. And the evidence that the Law Commission heard and that members of this House, I think, are all too familiar with, is that the environment in which some of our most marginalised and vulnerable communities are surrounded by is such that they are practically being basted in alcohol, that it's impossible for them to escape the ubiquity of alcohol outlets and sales if they chose to. So essentially, in recent years, we've come to a situation where alcohol is available for sale in pretty much every community in the country, essentially 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Indeed, sir, there are around 1,000 outlets in New Zealand that are licensed to sell alcohol on a 24/7 basis. Indeed, there are also, in the years between 1990 and 2010, in that 20-year period, there have been an explosion of 8,000 new outlets selling alcohol. And certainly members will be aware of many alcohol outlets in our own communities. These new outlets are not randomly distributed throughout the country or throughout communities or population centres, but rather they are clustered in low socioeconomic status areas. So they are clustered in the areas inhabited by the most vulnerable and marginalised. The distance that a person would need to travel in a low socioeconomic status area to, on average, make it to an alcohol outlet is 50% less than the equivalent high socioeconomic status suburb or area. And that's just an indication of how the alcohol industry at its various levels has targeted these low socioeconomic status communities. The effects of this are considerable. The evidence is that for every off-licence, and I quote from the Drug Foundation again, every off-licence is off-licence within a kilometre of a residential area, there is a 4% increase in binge drinking. Outlet density is linked to underage drinking, student drinking, and high-risk drinking by young people. And the weight of evidence is that when the density of alcohol outlets increases, we also see increased rates of violence and physical assaults, sexually transmitted infections, child abuse, drink driving, and those other deleterious consequences of alcohol consumption or heavy alcohol consumption that this bill sets out to minimise. So there is a direct relationship between outlet density and the purpose of this bill, which is to minimise harm. I mentioned yesterday that 70% of our presentations to accident and emergency departments. Mr. Chair.
I call the honourable member Kevin Hay.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The 70% of presentations to emergency departments over the weekend are from people who have been consuming alcohol. And I talked about those 1,000 deaths per year. And those are some of those negative consequences associated with the outlet density. There are also aspects of availability which relate to the hours that these outlets are open, and indeed there is strong evidence showing that longer trading hours mean increased negative and harmful effects. And I won't go through that list again, Mr. Chair, but it's clear that both outlet density and increased outlet hours are associated with increased harm. So if we want to deal with that harm, and this bill says that we do want to deal with it, then we need to address both of those factors. The way that the bill sets out to do that, I think there are some advances, but those advances, as with every other part of the bill, don't go far enough. And again, the Green Party will be voting for all of the SOPs that have been put forward by opposition members and by the Māori Party to actually gain greater control over where outlets are and the hours that they can be open in order to minimise that harm. The evidence around support for those measures is strong. As usual, the research, the scientific research around those factors say these are very effective means of limiting harm. And the Law Commission indeed drew some conclusions that were stronger than those in the bill itself. But it's not only the Law Commission. The New Zealand public has also had its say through the Health Sponsorship Council survey in 2010, which showed that 66% agreed or strongly agreed with reducing the hours that alcohol can be sold. And in addition to that 66%, there were a further 18% who were neutral about that point. So that's a vast majority that are either supportive of our tackling that issue or are neutral about it. And there were 65% of New Zealanders who thought there were too many liquor outlets. So I'm going to come in a later call to the issue of local alcohol policies. But for the time being, what I want to emphasise is the importance of taking this measure. And again, just as with the calls we heard earlier in this committee stage, we're dealing here with an issue that there is strong evidence around, and I'll be very interested to hear the Minister's calls and other calls taken by government members to defend the course that's set out in the bill, which I consider to be inadequate. In contrast to the raging debate that we had around purchase age only a short time ago, where there is very little evidence indeed of effectiveness. Here is something that has strong evidence of effectiveness, recommended by the Law Commission, and that enjoys a very high level of support from the New Zealand public. So we believe that the bill sets out in the right direction, but doesn't go nearly far enough. We want to see much more control over where outlets can be, and Lewis Wall's amendments around schools, for example, are a good example of the kind of restriction that we would like to see in general applied right across the country, in addition to the locally specific controls that local alcohol policies will produce. And we want to see a very substantial restriction on the hours that alcohol can be sold. We heard yesterday from Trevor Mallard in this debate a contribution where he opposed, on the basis of his personal experience, the idea of restricting the hours of sale of alcohol. Indeed, I've been a shift worker myself, and have always somehow managed to get a drink.
I call the honourable member Sewer